everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen, and welcome back to my channel. Hi, hello, welcome to my parents' house. Hi. I've been staying here for the past couple days, and I realized I don't have a video for this Friday, so I thought maybe I could do a vlog style chat through of a couple audiobook recommendations I have, because I don't have any of my books with me. So that is what we are doing today. We're gonna talk about audiobook recommendations. So some of my recent faves. I believe I've done a video like this before where I've talked through audiobooks that I really liked. As a avid audiobook listener, avid in the way of like, I find it difficult to read without an audiobook now because I always have my earphones in my ears. If you ever see me with these in during videos or clips, that's what it is. It's an earphone. It's an earphone because I've been listening to podcasts or audiobooks or music or watching YouTube videos or whatever. That's what that is. But yes, I've been listening to many an audiobook recently, and there are a few that have really stood out to me. So I figured, why not sit down and chat them through? We're gonna chat. I don't really know where I'm gonna put you. I'm gonna put you somewhere. We're just gonna chat. But yeah, I've been here at Mom and Dad's because my dad is currently in Germany and my mom works. And so with Bella, you know, we have the issue of who's gonna take care of her, you know, throughout the day, because Dad actually works from home, so he usually takes care of her during the day. Now that he's in Germany, he can't do that. So Mom asked me to come and work from home here for a couple days until Dad comes home, or until she's no longer working, because she only works 3 days a week. Those 3 days I've been here. I've been hanging out here at the house, working in my dad's office downstairs, which is quite nice. We're here to talk about audiobooks. So if you guys didn't know, just right off the bat, this is not sponsored by anything, but if you want a month free of Scribd, you can get it on me at the link in my description. I always have it there. It's always there if you want a free month of Scribd on me. That's usually my go-to place for audiobooks. That, and now I've started switching from Audible to Kobo, which is the Canadian version, and I prefer Kobo because it's a little less money every month, and it's also, you know, Canadian. But sometimes you don't find all the audiobooks you would on Audible, because of course Audible has like Audible exclusives, but we would rather not give money to Jeff Bezos. So I've been kind of switching over to Kobo a little bit, and I don't usually keep up buying every month a audiobook subscription like Audible or Kobo because it's expensive for only one audiobook. So usually if I'm like feeling a specific audiobook that is not on Scribd or my library app, I will go to Kobo or Audible and get it from there. But Scribd is the place to be for me, and also my Libby app as well. I think Libby is just great. Through the library, just great. All of the audiobooks that I'm gonna talk about today are available on Scribd or Audible or Kobo if you have any of those, and I'm pretty sure that if they're available on those, they are also available on like Libro.fm and stuff, because Libro.fm is, I think, the second biggest audiobook subscription place besides Audible. I might be wrong, but anyways. So yes, recently I have been really enjoying myself some fantasy audiobooks. Pretty much all of these, except for one is technically a little bit sci-fi, is fantasy. So we're gonna start with Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. And Shadow of the Gods is just a fan-friggin-tastic story. The audiobook is very good. Now, I love high fantasy audiobooks, especially when I have the book with me and I'm like double focused in on the story. It wraps me in the story and makes me so honed in on the book. I think that's really why I like audiobooks right now and have for a very long time. It's like double focusing me into the story, which is what I need a lot of the times because I get distracted very easy. But oh, we got a little friend visiting. Come here. Yeah, hello. I know, hi. I left you downstairs. You were snoozing so nicely. Hi. So yes, Shadow of the Gods is fantastic. I find that actually most of the John Gwynne audiobooks that I've listened to 2.5 so far because I'm halfway through Valor. So with John Gwynne's audiobooks, it does have I don't know, it's got like a flavor of high fantasy that settles you in almost like someone's reading you a story. It kind of gives me a feeling of like an updated Lord of the Rings audiobook vibe, which is always a good thing, and I really enjoyed it. And it was one of the audiobooks that I actually could listen to without having the book in front of me as well, which I find sometimes high fantasy books are like that, where it's really difficult for me to focus on the story without the book actually in front of me as well. So, you know, maybe that's just me, or maybe that's, you know, the fact that it's high fantasy, and high fantasy audiobooks are sometimes difficult to keep track of, but that's all right. Next up, I also wanted to talk about The Jasmine Throne, because y'all know The Jasmine Throne was one of my favorite books of last year, and I am so excited for the next one to come out this summer. I am just that it's one of my most anticipated books, but the audiobook for it was exceptional. I don't know what it was about the way that it was narrated, but it just had this flow that matched the story really well. Had this layer of like slow intrigue that really wrapped me and grabbed me into the story. The narrator for that book is just fantastic, and I really recommend it, also because The Jasmine Throne is just fantastic. Definitely check that one out if you are at all interested in that as well. I should probably be telling you what each of these books are about. Shadow of the Gods is like a Skyrim Viking inspired high fantasy with this very brutal, all the gods are dead kind of a vibe. You know, it's one of those high fantasy books. Jasmine Throne is a little bit more political and relationship based, so the world building in that one is just so cool. But I also really love the relationship between Priya and Malini, our two main characters, and also the other side characters as well. There is just something about the way that the narrator, I don't know if it was her tone of voice or just like the way that she put together the story. It was beautifully done. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful performance, I guess that's what I could call it. Let's talk about the Hall of Smoke series, I guess, because it's the same woman who voices both Hall of Smoke and the Temple of No God, which are both by Hannah Long, one of my friends, or H.M. Long, one of my lovely friends on the internet. I love her. She's a Canadian author. We love it. Her books are just absolutely phenomenal, but I've now read her books without an audiobook and with the audiobook, and there's something to say about those audiobooks adding like another layer on top. Like, I don't know what it is, but that narrator does such a good job to like emulate the feeling of the characters and really get across a lot of the emotion, even just in the descriptions. Like, it just catches you in, and I love it. I think it's also, I have a penchant for books that are narrated with an accent that is not Canadian or American. Because a lot of times I find Canadian or American accents to be really grating on my ears. I don't know why. I am Canadian. I don't know what it is about a specific like British accent or New Zealander accent or Scottish accent. Sometimes they just have an extra layer to the storytelling aspect to them. Maybe it's just a personal thing, but I really enjoy having accents in the storytelling. That goes with both the Shadow of the Gods and the Jasmine Throne as well, but there's just something to say about having that extra layer of storytelling. And the narrator for Hall of Smoke and Temple of No God is just phenomenal. They are I don't know what it is, but like the way that they voice the descriptions and things that Hannah Long has put into her books is just chef's kiss, so good. And Hall of Smoke, definitely recommendation to listen to on audiobook, as well as just reading the book in general, because that is a fantastic series. It, like Shadow of the Gods, is a little bit like Skyrim-y, Viking-y vibe, although it's less brutal than Shadow of the Gods, and it kind of follows a mortal who has been caught in the crossfire of a godly situation. There's like the war of the gods, and also she's been excommunicated, or like she's on the bad side of her goddess, and she's also one of the last of her people still standing, and she's like tasked to fix this. Like, she wants to fix it, obviously, because she wants to get back at her goddess's good graces. That kind of a story. Very good. Next up, let's talk about She Who Became the Sun. The narrator for She Who Became the Sun is just awesome. I actually follow her on TikTok, and her TikToks are so cool, and I don't know what it is with her voice. I believe she also voices One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. Her voice is in so many audiobooks now, and I'm just like catch on immediately. I'm like, oh, this is the girl from She Who Became the Sun. I don't know what it is. She's phenomenal in her pronunciations and her clarity, and she has an American accent, but it's one of the only ones that I can listen to very easily because she has a very soft tone, but it's very full and it's very engaging. I think that's really what it is about audiobooks that really call to me, is if they are engaging or not. And in a story like She Who Became the Sun, which is a epic historical fantasy that spans many, many years and has lots of battles and like little intricate things like that, you know, the intricate aspects to political natures. You need someone who is incredibly engaging to keep you attentive to it. I know my friend was looking for a fantasy recommendation, and this one was part of the recommendations that I gave her that she ended up picking, She Who Became the Sun, and she absolutely loved the audiobook. She was listening to it at work, so it was one of those things that like she needed something that actually kept her engaged, and she loved She Became the Sun. She said it was fantastic. So, and because the audiobook, it keeps you engaged. So we love the narrator for She Who Became the Sun. And anything that she does, I usually try and seek her out because I'm like, I know I like her voice, so I'll listen to her tell me stories at all times. So she's one of the only Americans that I enjoy listening to. All right, let's talk about The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This was a recent read of mine, and I absolutely adored this audiobook. It was well, I guess what you call like a full cast. It has different narrators for each point of view of the characters, and that is so good. Usually it's a hit or miss for me because sometimes one of the narrators will like just grate on my brain a little bit too much and I won't like them, but all three of these narrators were perfect for the characters, and I really enjoyed each one of their narration styles. The way that they like collectively kind of came together and worked really well with each other, bounced off each other's. I know that they don't actually have kind of like a full cast that like Dune has, where you have the narrator and then like people doing dialogue in between. That's not what I mean by this. It's like each point of view is narrated by a different person. But the way that each of those different people kind of like meshed together, it felt like they were the characters and that they were all together in this situation. So The Stardust Thief is one of my more recent reads that I've talked about here, but it is a high fantasy that follows oh, you can't even see her. There she is. Hello, baby girl. Hello, hello. It is a high fantasy that follows Luli, who is a midnight merchant, who is the midnight merchant, who basically, you know, goes about and finds these old djinn relics throughout her land with her djinn bodyguard, Kathir. And at the beginning of this, she gets tasked by the Sultan to essentially go and find something that is supposed to be impossible to find, and she gets tasked to do this alongside one of the crown princes, and one of the other crown princes, Prince Omar, is one of his 40 thieves, his best thief Aisha. So we have Prince Malzahn and Aisha the thief, and we have Luli as well, and we have Kathir on this, so it's like a little caravan of people going to steal things. Okay, I'll leave you alone. It was absolutely phenomenal and I really liked it, and I think the narration of it just elevated my love of the story. Another recent read that I also wanted to talk about was Gallant by V.E. Schwab. That audiobook was such an interesting ride for me. I think because of the way it was narrated, it felt like a children's book. Almost like, I don't know if any of you have ever gone to try listen to the audiobook of like The Golden Compass or something, or Aragon, or even like any of the older kid stories that were originally turned into audiobooks many, many years ago. So like the tracks themselves are a little bit older sounding and they just feel, I don't know, they feel like nostalgic in a way. That's what Gallant gave me. I don't know what it was about the narration style, but it was so interesting and phenomenally well done. Not only was the voice actor incredible, he was just perfect for the story. And I also found it very interesting that it was a man narrating it, seeing as we have a girl like main character, Olivia Pryor. But I think having that made it more storybook-like. It was like a little bit of a detachment, almost kind of like the narration of The Book Thief, where we have Death narrating the life of a little girl, right? It kind of has that like little bit of distance, I want to say. I don't know, but Gallant was really, really good. And I think what made it even better was the sound editing in it as well. I think, I could be entirely wrong, but I think that throughout Gallant there are pieces of like letters and stuff that, or like a journal that Olivia Pryor has that her mom put together that she reads throughout the book, that is then read out to us through the narration style of the audiobook, right? But in those letters, there are bits scratched out and like lines that are scratched out. So instead of the narrator being like saying the line and then saying redacted or scratched out, there is actually the sound of a pen running across the page at the end of each sentence. So we know that that has been bard. And each one of those scratch lines sounds new and fresh, like he, the narrator, was actually sitting there with a pen and would say the line and then scratch it out. So I don't know if that was how it was, but it sounded like he was actually physically scratching it out, which was so cool. It was an element of, like, when I first heard it in the story, a chill ran up my spine, because the book itself is like gently creepy, right? Because it's Olivia Pryor is a mute girl who just, you know, doesn't have any family, and she's kind of tossed into this orphanage, and she's lived there for a long time, this kind of school for not well-off girls, and then she gets the chance to go live with family that she didn't know she had. She arrives there, it's the gallant manor, and there's like creepy stuff happening. So it is a tensiony, creepy, drippy, I know V.E. Schwab has compared it to Crimson Peak. I've never seen Crimson Peak, but that kind of a story. So having these sound elements added in, very cool, and it definitely elevated the storytelling for me, for sure. Another one that I really like, the second last audiobook recommendation that I have for you today, is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. This was a fantastic audiobook. I listened to this in like 3 hours. So it was one of the audiobooks that I could listen to at like 3 times speed, just zipping through it and still being completely engaged in the story. I had borrowed the physical book from the library, so I was reading along with it, which did help me speed through it, but the way that it was narrated, like Gallant in a way, had like a fairy tale aspect to it, a children's tale, weird, gentle creepiness, and it was very good, and it stood out since I read The Bone Houses. I believe it was earlier this year. Also, the book itself is a 5-star YA book for me, which is very rare nowadays. I really enjoyed it. I don't know what it is. I think, again, it just comes down to the engaging aspects of the narrators, right? They just keep you engaged, and Bone Houses was like that. The story itself as well, obviously you have to have a good story for it to be engaging. It is not all down to the narrator themselves, but it was very good. The Bone Houses itself is a, I want to say, like historical fantasy type of YA novel, a little bit horror in it. It deals with like Victorian zombies. So it follows our 2 main characters. One of them who is a girl who's just trying to save her family because her dad's gone missing, and her uncle who was supposed to take care of her is dead. And there's also these zombies that keep coming and attacking the town every night that she has to like protect the town from. And a lot of the town folk don't believe that these bone houses are real, and that's what they're called, these zombies or whatever, because they like come out of the ground. They're reanimated by the ground. There's like a magic in the forest soil, but they only are supposed to come up to like the barrier of the forest, which is why a lot of the townsfolk haven't seen them before, and they don't really think that they're real. But it's this story of her and this young map maker who comes from the city to try and like map out this area that no one's ever mapped out before. They go on a trek through this woods and deal with these bone houses, and they find themselves, they go like almost following a myth of this like cauldron that will help them fix this issue, because there's like myths and stories around this cauldron, and it's like the reason or like the fault of causing these bone houses to exist. So it's a very interesting story, and it does have like elements of horror. There's a lot of like moments of like great tension, and like all of a sudden there's a zombie touching your leg kind of a thing. So it was very good, and it was an interesting read to have at like 3 a.m., which is when I was listening to it, but very good. And the last recommendation I have for you guys today is Gideon the Ninth. I love this, both this and Harold the Ninth. The narration, whoever they picked, I don't know her name. I don't really know any of the names of any of these narrators, but the person they picked to narrate these books is perfection. The way that she can slightly alter her voice from Gideon's narration in the first book, because it's Gideon's point of view top to bottom in that book, but then in Harrow the Ninth, it's Harrow's point of view. And I only really noticed that there was a difference until we had Gideon narrating a little bit in Harrow. Like, Gideon ends up taking over the story for a second, and the subtle change that we have in Gideon's voice comes through not only in like the actual prose that Tamsin Muir has written, but the narration style changes ever so slightly by our audiobook narrator. She is phenomenal, and just the way that she like executes the quips and the jokes and the little intricacies of Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth are just fabulous, and I love that narrator so much. I don't know if I've listened to her in anything else. I feel like I have come across her after that. I want to say she also voiced Scorpica, but I could be entirely wrong. I could be entirely wrong because sometimes I get voices mixed up in my head, but she is phenomenal. Whoever voices Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth, phenomenal. Gideon the Ninth, if you guys don't know, is a space opera fantasy situation with like lesbian necromancers in space, but Gideon specifically is a like murder mystery in space, kind of like And Then There Were None, because like suddenly all these people are dying and they don't know why. It follows Gideon, who is the cavalier to her necromancer Harrow, who is the like, you know, heir of the 9th planet, which is where they're from, and it is this competition essentially to become a full-blown lictor, which is this like high up person who deals with like their god emperor man in this world. It's wild, it's bad shit. Sometimes it's a little hard to follow, but I think having the audiobook and the book in front of me helped me like follow along a little bit better. Even though I was confused and didn't really know what was going on, it was a super fun ride, and the audiobook narrator excels at helping that. I love audiobooks so much, and I could recommend them all day long. All day long. What else have I read recently that was just fantastic? Like, there's something to say about an audiobook narrator who takes over a multi-POV story, kind of like the audiobook for Seven Devils by Elizabeth May and Laura Lamb. That book is narrated by one woman, but it has multiple point of views in it, yet I was never confused in it as to who was talking, which is just exceptional. When one audiobook narrator can do that, I don't know. I have always wanted to also try narrating audiobooks myself, but I just don't think I have the acting chops to do that, like having to be able to pitch my voice in different ways. I don't have that ability very well, so, or like the ability to consistently do the same voices for characters. But I admire audiobook narrators so much because that is a crazy job. That is such a cool, crazy job to have. I really enjoy also following them on TikTok. I don't know if you guys are on TikTok and follow different audiobook narrators, but they're so fun to follow because sometimes they'll post like their blooper reels, which are just hilarious. Anyways, my friends, do you have any books that you've recently listened to that you absolutely love? Because if you do, please let me know down in the comments, because I will add them to my TBR and all that kind of stuff, because y'all know I'm here for audiobooks all day long. Anyways, my friends, thank you so much for watching this kind of random little video set in my parents' place, but I will catch you in another video very, very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.